Hey, folks, it's Dr. Sam, and I'd like to welcome you to another EyeClarity Podcast. As promised, as part of our pre-Vision Summit interviews, I've invited one of the featured speakers today, and we're going to have a great conversation. We have with us today one person who when I was interviewing and looking for people, this healer actually just jumped out and did some research on her, and I'm so excited to bring her on. Her name is Andrea Rossi. Andrea is a practicing nutritionist and community herbalist and the founder of Dirt and Bones. I love that name. She supports a big-hearted, big impact humans experiencing overwhelm, anxiety, burnout. It's kind of what we're all feeling today. I know I am. And she's able to, through her nutritional therapy, herbal support, and her nature experience programs, help people nurture their nervous system, develop resiliency. And she works in a very individualized way, which is the way I like to work. And Andrea, in bringing you on, I want to ask you, what is your world like as an herbalist? You know, when people are seeking you out, how are you bringing the plants into your healing equation and being able to help them?
Hi, yes, that's a great question. I think it looks like a lot of different things. So I think when people typically think of herbalism, they think of formulas like tinctures or teas or things they see in the stores. And so that's definitely one way that I work with plants, where I'm working with an individual to see what's going on with them and then connect them with the plants whose personalities best match the need of the person and their personality. And kind of essentially it's a bit like a matchmaking between a person in the plant world. So I do a little bit of facilitating those relationships. And then some other areas of my work, though, are actually just bringing people out to connect with plants out in the natural world. And I think that's something a lot of herbalists do that we don't think about as much. It's not just taking these different formulations, but experiencing the plants in the moment and being able to cultivate relationship and really knowing that they can be healing for us even before we consume them. That even just being in a relationship and being out there with the plants is something that can really change us. So there's a lot of different avenues, and it looks like working with them in clinical practice. It also looks like doing education, and sometimes it looks like doing community programs. Right now, it looks like a lot of virtual experiences, but outside of this particular time, a lot of times you're getting out in nature and you're actually connecting with one another and with the nature world.
Yeah, I love that. I think the more we can get out into nature, there's a certain communication that is transmitted, and to be able to, I know we can't do it right now as much, but the hands-on, like really seeing and feeling, smelling, all our senses with the plants is really, really great. So what inspired you to become an herbalist? What's your story?
Well, it's interesting because it's kind of to your point about, getting out there and being with the plants. My first I was always interested in plants and herbs ever since I was a little girl, just spending time outside with plants. But I, many years ago, went through my own healing crisis. Probably over 10 years ago now. And during that time, I just happened to be invited to this retreat with an herbalist. And this herbalist had spent a year out in the wilderness, just not even communicating with people, and just kind of re-entered and have been doing a lot of work with the plants, and had us do this experience where we were all just sitting with a different plant. All we were doing was sitting with it. We weren't taking anything. We were just experiencing the plant. And that was the first time I'd ever really done anything like that, aside from enjoying hikes and nature. And when that happened, it was just this really profound experience. It just so happened I'd sat in front of a plant that happened to actually be the medicine, both emotionally and physically, for my body at that time. So it just kind of changed me. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I didn't realize how deep this goes, and also how many areas of our lives plants can impact us. And so from there, it was kind of this slow, circuitous journey where I was, dabbling in plants and then got more serious with it over time. And so it just was kind of a long, windy journey. But that's how I started. And I think that's how a lot of people start, is having a singular experience or a combination of little experiences where they get to have that experiential approach to the plant world.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. So we are here with Andrea Rossi, who is founder of Dirt and Bones. She's an herbalist, nutritionist. She's also a speaker at our upcoming Vision Summit online whole health workshop in January 15th to the 21st. And so, Andrea, I guess we should talk a little bit about, don't give everything away, but what's been your experience, herbs that actually help the eyes? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so what's really interesting about herbs, and I'm actually going to talk about this a lot in my talk, is a lot of times the different blogs we see, and even things I've read, will say like the top 5 herbs for eyes. But when we really get to know plants, they have these distinct personalities, and they don't just work on one area of the body. So in many ways, there's an argument that there's a ton of different plants that actually can work with eye health. And so when we talk about the talk, I'm going to be going into how can you know the personality of a plant so that it's right for you. And I'll be looking at things like, for example, if we talk about red irritated eyes, there's a lot of different herbs that people might see would fit with that, like eye bright or goldenrod. But if we look a little deeper, each of those plants has a personality and kind of suits itself towards working with the eyes in different ways. So for example, eye bright might be good for the red irritated eye that's really mucusy, whereas goldenrod might be more indicated for a red irritated eye that kind of stings with that feeling like when you get out of a chlorinated pool. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the herbs, we'll focus in on just a few different herbs and their personalities and talk about how do you use them. And I'll do some demonstrations too to show how you can easily make things like a compress or an infusion, things that you can do in your home with different herbs that you may already know and have a relationship with, or new herbs that you might not have experienced yet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh, that's great. Well, we're so looking forward to having you. I know my community is really interested in herbalism, and they're kind of anti-pharmaceuticals as much as possible, which brings me to a more general question. Based on what we've been going through the last 9 months with COVID, and working with people either nutritionally and or herbally, what kind of herbal formulas are you recommending? For all the things that we're going through, everything from isolation to maybe feeling a little depressed, worried about our immune system. What say you on these particular topics?
That's a great question. I always am thinking of both form and the herbs. Mm-hmm. So form has to do with whether people are taking it as a tea, a tincture, a powder. An actual experience with plants is considered a first medicine, which is where you're getting direct experience. And so I think the form that I've tended to focus on for all of the things that have going on has been both the direct experience component as well as teas. Because teas have this really amazing ability that if you aren't seeing someone directly, they can be a lot more gentle. They also can make direct contact with the gastrointestinal lining and the mucous membranes. And it's also a soothing drink that's, especially kind of in the cooler winter months, it's a lot easier to ritualize into a daily routine. So in terms of form, I definitely like teas. And then in terms of the herbs that I really have been seeing people respond well to in terms of like specifically the mental health components of really needing support for the nervous system, are definitely things like motherwort, which is this amazing plant that really tends to the heart. while also it feels like an emotional hug. And many people who've experienced motherwort have the sense of being almost encompassed by the plant. It's used in a lot of other ways in terms of like the endocrine system. And it is a more cooling plant. So if you tend towards cooling, it's a plant that you want to engage with care, because it can essentially alter the menstruation for folks that are experiencing menstrual cycles. But it is this really lovely plant. So motherwort is one. Some other gentle ones like passion flower, which is really great for those busy minds, especially that racing mind that's chattering and can't necessarily let up at night. Blue vervain, which is not as good in a tea. That one's definitely better in a tincture because it's so bitter. But that one I've seen a lot of people go to as a resource. Definitely blue vervain is sometimes one of those that's great for the kind of like overachieving, overwork, burning the candle at both ends kind of individual. And then finally, I'd say milky oats, which is a nutritive one. And milky oats is great in a tea form. And milky oats is one that is really nourishing for someone who's been depleted over a long period of time, whether that's from chronic illness, prolonged stress. And it's really something that's a rejuvenative kind of tonic in many ways for individuals that are just feeling fully depleted. So those are some of the herbs that I found to be really great in terms of like that mental health realm. And a lot of people have been finding comfort and connection with those herbs. And then in terms of immune resilience, there's a lot of different ones. But I'd say some of the ones that I've really kind of ushered forward for some folks are some of the immune modulating ones, like mushrooms. A lot of your mushrooms, like your reishi, they can do a lot for your gastrointestinal system, while also doing a lot with your nervous system at the same time. So creating like reishi bone broths that you're integrating other herbs into. And then simple things like thymes and your kitchen herbs, your culinary herbs, your oregano, things that are really aromatic and lifting, and make great steams as well. So quite a few different herbs, and it also depends on the person as to what they need specifically for their constitution. But yeah, it's been a year where plants have become really a much needed friend for us during this incredibly hard time.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? We are here with Andrea Rossi, who is founder of Dirt and Bones. She's a nutritionist and an herbalist. She's one of our featured speakers at my upcoming Vision and Whole Health Online Summit. And Andrea, I wanted to ask you your process when you go out and you harvest your own plants. Take us through your kind of emotional, spiritual, energetic process in, how you make the collection, and maybe from harvest all the way to actually creating the herbs. I know you teach classes related to that. So give us a little inside look into how you do that.
That's a great question. And it's such an important question, I think, as well, because we have a lot of people today that are interested in harvesting herbs, and really because of sometimes that lack of intentionality or potentially understanding from folks, we do now have plants that are at risk in wild places. So actually the very first step is really, a lot of times they call it stewarding the natural environment or tending the natural environment. So oftentimes wild places, years sometimes before I'll ever take anything, I'm really watching the environment, really seeing if there's kind of sustainability for a certain plant, and whether it's thriving in any given way. So there's a lot of tending involved. Even in areas like the backyard that I have or the front yard, there's certain plants that grow of their own. Like I have an Oregon grape bush and a catnip and just random plants that have come forth. And so a lot of it is stewarding those things that are there before even taking anything, to make sure that if I am going to, that it has the ability to sustain long term, and that the ecosystem it's in can sustain it. And then other considerations before even going and getting anything are where it's located. Because, for example, if you're gathering a plant that can, clean the soil, and in doing that might hypersequester toxins from the environment, such as if it's near the road and can potentially sequester that in its leaves, then those are plants that I might not gather for consumption or use. So that's kind of the initial stage. And then when going out before harvesting a plant, once you've seen if it's the right stand and that there's enough abundance, then when gathering, oftentimes there's what I like to call some sort of offering. That can be like the offering of a song, that can be a prayer. It looks different for different people. Some herbalists will put native seed that is appropriate to the area, or bring water to water the plants around it, to essentially give something in service to the plant. And then there's the harvesting. And in terms of harvesting, typically I'm looking at things that are the aerial parts that can grow back. So leaves, making sure that you're leaving enough leaves so that the plant can continue to get energy for its own health and well-being. And then also typically I don't harvest roots that I'm not cultivating myself, just because once you get the root for most plants, that's kind of the end of its life cycle. And so I'm typically not getting roots unless it's something I'm cultivating myself. And then from that process, you're, thanking the plant, and oftentimes even before harvesting, in that blessing moment, sometimes you can sit with the plant and see if there's anything specific about it that comes to you about what that particular plant is offering, because there's the things we can read about in books, and then there's that individual plant in that place on that day and that time. So sometimes you'll jot down notes about things you observe or feel or notice, or that come from the plant. And then you bring that home, and there's a lot of different ways that people can dry plant parts. But I typically will either do it like on screens, out in the sun, out in the heat of the day, or you can do it like in a dehydrator, or you can even do it in the oven that you keep open on the lowest setting. That can sometimes, the oven can sometimes over dry, leading to losing some of those constituents. But and then from there you go into either keeping it for a dry herb that you're now going to use later in a tea blend, or you could potentially use it to tincture, in which case some cases you can use fresh plant material to do that, or you're using it for some other thing like an infusion, a decoction, a liniment. It all just depends on what you're making from there. Sure. So that's kind of the basic process. And I always like to tell people, if they're interested, to really just start with what's in their yard, really get to know how the plants grow and operate, so that when you go and you're engaging with it, it is in this way that's kind of tending to the greater ecosystem.
Sure. I love it. It's really such a respectful, sacred process. And I've taken part in it myself, and it's so heart-opening and just super exciting to be able to, access medicine like in our backyard, like where we're living, and all of a sudden you see, a certain plant growing. It's like, oh, that's exactly what I need. So go ahead.
It's profound how that happens, how you can be feeling something and then you're like, oh, here's this plant, and yes. It's amazing. It never ceases to amaze me.
Yes, so true. So we are here having a conversation with Andrea Rossi, who is founder of Dirt and Bones, and she's an herbalist and nutritionist. She's going to be one of our featured speakers in the upcoming Vision Summit. Can you give us a little bit of maybe information on your offerings as you move into 2021, so people can get in touch with you?
Yes, absolutely. So in 2021, the early part of the year, I'll be doing some kind of, I'll be doing this summit, I'll be doing some education and some speaking. And then come March of 2021, I will be taking on new clients in my practice. I'm taking kind of the beginning part of the year off as a little homage to self-care after quite a 2020. And then later in the spring, I have this program called Nurture by Nature. And it's kind of this community gathering. It's virtual, and people get plants, and it walks through just building these relationships with plants specific to helping with the nervous system resilience. So we go really in depth talking every week about a different element and the plants that relate with that element and how to balance manifestations of that element in the nervous system in particular. And it's filled with all these different experiential moments and community herbal gatherings that we do virtually. So it's a really sweet experience. And so we'll be doing that in the spring. And those are kind of the big things that are upcoming in the early part of 2021 that I'm looking forward to.
So how can people contact you directly?
Oh, great question. So the best way to get in touch with me is either to send me an email at just hello@dirtandbones.com. And if you go to my website, dirtandbones.com, you can also contact me through that. And I also am on Instagram at Dirt and Bones Wellness. And so you can also message me through there. I definitely have to say DMs through Instagram is not the best way. The best way is definitely email. I'm a good email checker, and I'm not always a great Instagram checker, working on it. So
Okay, good to know. Yeah, it's certainly an interesting world out there with social media and all the different channels that people can contact you. Well, I want to thank you so much for your generosity of spirit and your passion. And I look forward to having you be part of our summit. And folks, I recommend working with Andrea. I think she's really, really great. And Andrea, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
thank you so much. It was great to be here. I'm so excited for your summit. Thank you for putting it together.
You are welcome. All right, everybody, that's a wrap. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And again, I look forward to seeing you in 2021, first at the summit, and then also with some of the different programs we have connected. So until next time, everybody, take good care. All right. Oh no.